Hi everybody, my name is Fabian and I am a fashion designer from Los Angeles, California, and today I'm here to bring you a tutorial on pattern manipulation. This technique is a play on a traditional princess line. I have two examples here to show you that incorporate this technique. On this dress, with the use of color blocking, you can see that our princess line begins in the armhole, goes to a point at the apex, and goes straight down into the hemline, and it creates a really edgy and angular look. For this piece, we incorporated the same technique, but the only difference here is that we incorporated some shaping into the bust line so that it creates a very nice slimming and feminine look. Now let's go over the materials you're going to need for this tutorial. First thing you're going to need are your pattern pieces for front and back, as well as two pieces of paper to trace them out onto. I'm using the numerical dot paper, which is standard for pattern making, but you can use any other type of large format paper that you have at home. You're also going to need a gridded ruler, such as this one. You may not be able to see it because it's see-through, and this works really great for adding seam allowances and adding design lines. You are going to need scissors for your paper and scissors for your fabric. You're going to need Scotch tape. Magic tape works really well. You're also going to need some pins for sewing. You're going to need muslin to cut your pattern, marking utensils. I'm going to be using black and red ink so that it shows up more on camera, but you definitely want to be using pencil. First, we're going to begin with our front pattern piece. As you can see here, I have just a very basic torso pattern, and I've traced it onto our paper here. We need to also examine what exactly is going on with this pattern piece. As you can see, I have a shoulder dart and a vertical fisheye dart or double-ended dart. In essence, what we are doing is we are using the excess from these two darts to create our new princess line. The first thing we need to take care of is our shoulder dart. But first, we also need to know where our bust apex is. Here I have made an indication in red ink. To begin, we need to figure out where our new princess line is going to start. I always use my armhole notch as this point, but as long as you stay along the upper portion of your armhole, it will work. Now what we're going to do is we are going to take our ruler, and I'm going to take my red pen, and I'm going to line it up with the bust apex and the armhole notch and draw a straight line. My armhole notch is about 3 inches away from the side seam. Now we are going to extend our shoulder dart into the bust apex. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up our ruler with the bust apex to the edge of the dart leg, like so. And I'm going to connect these points, and then I'm going to move over to the next side and do the same thing. And what this does is this allows the shoulder dart to be extended into the apex and not end farther away from it as it usually would. So now what we're going to do is we are going to cut along our fresh line that we made here, going to our armhole notch and along both sides of our dart leg, but we're going to cut up to but not through the bust apex point. So take your scissor or your rotary cutter like I'm using here, and you're just going to cut along these lines like so. And again, you're going to cut up to but not through the bust apex. So after you cut along the lines and removed the excess paper from the shoulder dart, this is what you should have. You should have this section here that just kind of moves like a hinge. We're going to take this section of our shoulder and we're going to bring it over to match this side and carefully line it up. Take your tape off and you're going to tape these two edges together. And what this does is this closes our shoulder dart but moves the excess that was here, that extra piece, and it moves it into our armhole. This is going to give us the necessary shaping that we need to create this new princess line. So you can also add more tape if you need, and we can go ahead and move on to our fisheye dart. Now we're going to take care of our double-ended dart or our fisheye dart. And much like with the shoulder dart, we need to extend it so that it ends all the way up at the bust apex and does not end just before the apex like it is here. We're going to take our ruler and line up the farthest out point, and we're going to line it up with our bust apex and draw a line. And again, you definitely want to be using pencil and not ink like I am here. Move over to the other side and repeat. And now for the bottom half of the dart, we're going to square a straight line from the vanishing point to our hemline. So I'm going to line up my ruler with the vanishing point and making sure that it is squared with my hemline here. And we're going to just simply draw a line. and that takes care of the bottom portion. Now that we have our markings in place, we can move forward with cutting these pieces apart. What we're going to do is we're going to start cutting at our hemline here, and we're going to move up into the dart, cut off one side of our dart legs all the way up to the apex, and then we're going to come back and cut along the other side and completely remove the excess from this dart. What this is going to do is this is going to remove the excess from this dart so we can use it to turn it into our princess line. Next, we will go ahead and cut these two pieces apart. So after you cut your pieces apart, this is what you should have. You should have your front piece and your side front piece. And also take note how your front piece has an inverted corner and that your side front piece just has a regular point to it, like so. Since we have both of our pieces cut and separated now, we need to add in our grain lines. My front piece already has my grain line written in here, and this symbolizes that this piece is cut on the fold. And I'm simply going to write front on fold. For our side front piece, I'm simply going to just draw in a straight line, making sure that I'm lined up with my 1-inch indications here, and just make a straight line from top to bottom. We're also going to add arrows. This piece we're going to write side front cut 2. And this ultimately just gives us direction as to how it gets put onto our fabric when we cut and sew. What we need to do now is we need to add our seam allowances to our new edges here. And how you do that is I'll show you on my side front piece here. So you're going to take some scrap paper and you're simply going to place it underneath, put some tape on it to hold it down, and you're going to do this for both edges. And you also want to make sure that your paper extends all the way to the bottom edge, unlike the way mine does here. And now what we will do is we will take our marking utensil and our gridded ruler, and we're going to add in our seam allowance. I'm going to add 1/2 inch to mine, but if you're working with any kind of a commercial pattern, usually those seam allowances tend to be 5/8 of an inch. So you're going to take your ruler and simply line it up. Again, in my case, I'm doing 1/2 inch, so I'm going to line it up with 1/2 inch and draw a line. And you're going to do that along all of the edges. And for the end of the seam here, you're just going to make sure that it's lined up with 1/2 inch at the very end and just make a line like this. This makes the seam nice and square so that it matches up with the other piece. And you can even add in another piece of tape here just to make sure that it stays together. And once your piece looks like this, you have taped your pieces of paper underneath the pattern and made your 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch mark. You're going to take your scissor and just cut along the edge like I am here. And at this point, you can go ahead and cut along the rest of your pattern piece. Also making sure that your seam allowance is included. And once you have done that, this is what your piece will look like. And then you're going to go ahead and repeat this process on your front piece. And once you have done that, you are ready to move forward with the back piece. Instead of drawing a line to the bust apex from your dart, we're going to extend our dart into the vanishing point of our double-ended dart here. And after you do that, you want to go ahead and also draw in your new princess line, which again is about 3 inches from the side seam, just like with our front. At this point, just like with our front pattern piece, we are going to cut along our lines up to but not through the vanishing point of our dart. And you're going to cut along the armhole line up to but not through the vanishing point of the dart like so. And then go up to your shoulder and repeat. Again, like our front pattern piece, is we're going to take this section of our shoulder, we are going to bring it over to the other side and overlap to meet like so. Tape it down, making sure that it is secure. From us closing this dart, it moved the excess into our armhole. This is exactly what you wanted to do. After you do that, you can go ahead and cut your pieces apart and add the seam allowances just like we did for the front. The only other modification we need to make is on our shoulder line here. If you look closely, you can see that from closing our dart, it threw off our shoulder line, so it does not match. We're going to take our ruler and we're going to retrue this line so that it's nice and smooth and it sews smoothly onto our front piece. So we're going to line up the ruler with our armhole edge and with our neck edge. And you're going to, again, draw a straight line like so. And this just kind of gets rid of the little bump that we had here. And we're going to retrue our seam allowance, which again is 1/2 inch in this example. And this takes care of that little bump that we had here. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and cut our patterns out of our muslin. I went ahead and laid mine out on the table flat like so, and you're going to take your pattern pieces. I'm going to use the front as an example. We're going to place our side front piece on the fabric. You're going to take your front piece, and since we are cutting this piece on the fold, we're just going to move the piece up against the fold like so, and you'll take your pins and you'll begin to pin around each piece. You can pin as often as you'd like. And you're going to do the same thing to this piece. And once you have both of the front pieces pinned on and cut, you're going to repeat these steps for the back. And then we will come back and start sewing. Now that we have our pieces cut, we are ready to begin sewing. But first thing, we need to go ahead and pin these together and talk about how we're going to sew these together. I'm going to remove all of my pins and get my pieces separated. And now you can see that we have our front piece and our two side front pieces. I'm going to show you how to pin these together to get them ready for sewing. The first thing we need to do is on both sides of our fabric, and you can see here that I've indicated our wrong sides with X's. We're going to mark where our seam allowances intersect each other at each point on both the front and the side front piece. Take your ruler, for example, we'll use the front piece. Line up ruler with the 1/2 inch mark. Simply make a line that goes through the point of our princess line. You're going to come down below, draw another line, and then you'll flip it over and do the same thing on the wrong side of the fabric. And then you'll take the side front piece and make sure you're working with the correct side, and you're going to do the same thing. And again, we have these marks on both the right and the wrong side. You are going to repeat this to the other side of the front and as well as your back pieces. Since we have our seam allowances marked, we're going to take our front piece, and you're going to take your scissor and you're going to snip up to but not through where we marked the intersection for our seam allowances. Now that we have this snip, this allows this corner to be released, so it makes it easier when we get to the sewing machine. Now let's go ahead and pin these two pieces together. And you're going to lay them one on top of the other, and we're going to begin to pin these together. You're going to start at the hemline, but also making sure that your front piece, your center front piece, is facing up. We're going to pin at the hem and work our way all the way up. When we get to our point here, what we're going to do is you're going to take your front piece, the piece that has the clip in it, you're going to take a pin and you're going to place it in the intersection of our seam allowances here where they cross, and you're going to match that with the intersection of your side front piece. Match those up like so and pin in place. Now you're going to take this piece of your front and you're going to rotate it so that it matches like this. You're going to place a pin near the top, in the middle, and then at the end where the point is where your seam allowances intersect. And at this point, we're ready to take this to the sewing machine. Here at the sewing machine, and I'm going to show you how to sew these pieces together. Here where my hand is our neckline, and this here is our armhole. We're going to start stitching at the armhole edge so that we're sewing with the back piece facing up. We're going to start at this point, sew down up into our pivot point where we clipped into our piece. Once we get to this point, we're going to sink our needle into the fabric. We're going to lift our presser foot and pivot and continue stitching all the way down to the hemline, back stitching, and then cutting our threads. Alright, so let's get sewing. To sew this seam, I'm going to be sewing it at a 2.5 stitch length. And this is so that we can get a nice and clear point when we have to pivot in the fabric. If you work with a 3.0 stitch or a 3.5, you may overshoot the point. So let's go ahead and do that. Put our fabric under the needle, and I'm going to line up my 1/2 inch mark with the edge of my fabric. If you're working with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to just kind of scoot it over a little bit farther, again making sure that it matches with that seam guide mark on your needle plate. We're going to lower our presser foot and begin sewing. We're going to take a few stitches forward and then back stitch, and then we're going to continue sewing along our edge here. As we approach the point of our princess line, you need to make sure that there is no excess fabric underneath the needle, making sure that everything is nice and smooth. If you need to, you can go ahead and sink your needle into the fabric and raise your foot and just kind of make sure that it's nice and smooth like this. So let's continue. As we approach the point, you just want to go nice and slow, and you can even hand crank the wheel if you feel like you're going to overshoot it. And once you have reached exactly at that point, you can go ahead and raise your foot with your needle in the fabric and pivot. And you can see that I can go just a smidge farther, so I'm going to scooch it back, take the pin out, put my foot down, go one more stitch, raise my foot again, pivot, and continue sewing. And we're going to continue stitching all the way down to the hemline. Once you get to the hemline, you go right up to the edge and backstitch, come forward, raise your foot, and cut your threads. This is a close-up of what the point of our princess line looks like. You can see where we sinked our needle into the fabric and pivoted, and then we continued sewing down into the hemline. And you want it to be nice and sharp. You're going to do the same thing for your back pieces. So after sewing, you want to go ahead and press your seam. What I've done here is I've laid the piece wrong side up so that you can see the line that we just sewed. We're going to press our seam towards the front, or towards the center. The best way to do this is to flip your piece over like this and work from the right side. So you can go ahead and just kind of peek underneath and make sure that your seam is facing towards the center. So this way. And you'll take your iron and you're going to just kind of gently pull on the fabric so that you can get to your seam and give it a good press. You will do this all the way up the seam line. And make sure you use lots of steam so that it will lay nice and flat. And if your piece has any other wrinkles that are happening, you want to get those out now. We have a nice smooth seam. So the end result is a nice pointed princess line that has the necessary shaping that you need to get up and over the bust and cinches in at the waist. And in this case, our line goes all the way to the hemline. And with this manipulation, it is much like our jacket example, where it nips in at the waist and goes out around the waist and goes down to the hemline, but still has the shaping to go up and over the bust. This concludes this pattern manipulation tutorial. Thank you for watching. If you would like to see more content like this, let us know. And if you have any questions at all, make sure to leave them in the comment section below.